We have a slight technical problem. We'll be back in 30 seconds here.
Good afternoon, everybody. That was quite the moving work of sand art by Ilana Yahav. She did that for the Jewish Federation of Philadelphia. Can everybody hear me clearly in the back? Awesome. Great. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming today to commemorate the Holocaust and remember those who suffered and lost their lives during this dark period of history. My name is Maxine Sennett, and I am the child of 2 Holocaust survivors. I am also the chair of the State of North Carolina Holocaust Commemoration Planning Committee. The Holocaust Commemoration Planning Committee is one of several committees under the North Carolina Council on the Holocaust. The Holocaust Council, in turn, is organized under the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. In just a moment, Dr. Carlin from the Department of Public Instruction will offer her greetings. Dr. Carlin has been instrumental in leading the effort to create the Holocaust curriculum for the North Carolina public schools. At the back of your program, if you take a moment to look at the back of your program towards the bottom, you will find the names of the members of the Commemoration Committee. If you see them today, please say hello and thank them. And at this time, I would like all the members of the committee to please stand. In addition, I would like to thank Amy Bush, the president, and Phil Brodsky, the executive director of the Jewish Federation of Greater Raleigh, for their financial support to mail over 5,000 postcards to promote this commemoration. The Federation has always been a partner with the Holocaust Council. Thank you for that. Shortly, we will hear from Dr. Zahara Boyd, our featured speaker who has presented her war experience across the state. Dr. Boyd is Professor Emeritus of English at Appalachian State University. Dr. Boyd is also a member of the Holocaust Council and is part of the Council Speakers Bureau. Today, we come together to pay tribute to the millions of Jews, Roma, people with disabilities, LGBTQ, and other marginalized communities who were targeted and persecuted by the Nazi regime during World War II. The Holocaust remains one of the most devastating events in human history, and its impact can still be felt today. My apologies. We gather to honor the memories of those who were taken from us too soon, and to recognize the resilience and strength of those who survived. We also come together to remind ourselves and future generations of the dangers of hatred, the dangers of bigotry and prejudice. The Holocaust serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of speaking out against injustices, promoting tolerance, and working towards creating a more just and equitable world. In addition, today we also observe the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, a rebellion that occurred in the Warsaw Ghetto in Nazi-occupied Poland. It began on April 19th, 1943, and lasted until May 16th, 1943. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was a significant act of resistance in which Jewish residents in Nazi-occupied Poland revolted against the German army and attempted to resist deportation to concentration camps. In April 1943, the Germans began a final operation to liquidate the ghetto and transport the remaining inhabitants to Treblinka death camp. In response, a group of Jewish resistance fighters formed and launched an uprising against the Nazis. Ultimately, the Germans crushed the uprising and the ghetto was destroyed. Thousands of Jews were killed, and the remaining inhabitants were sent to concentration camps. However, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising became a symbol of Jewish resistance against the Nazis and has remained an important event in Jewish history and the fight against oppression. As we remember the atrocities of the past, we must also recognize the ongoing need to fight against anti-Semitism and other forms of hate and discrimination. Today, we pledge to continue to fight against intolerance and to work towards creating a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, regardless of their religion, and regardless of their background. In closing, I would like to quote the famous philosopher George Santayana, who once said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Today, we remember the past and vow to never forget. Let us continue to work towards a better future for all. And now I would like everybody to please stand and join Nicole Mania as we sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
And I'd like to invite Dr. Carlin.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Carlin, and I have the honor to serve as the Section Chief for Social Studies and Arts Education at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. I'm humbled to be here today to bring greetings on behalf of myself and the agency. In my role at DPI, I have the responsibility of overseeing the implementation of the Gazella-Abramson Holocaust Education Act. This is a tremendously personal honor, as I had the privilege to know and learn from Gazella in my graduate studies here at NC State and through her work with my own theater students many years ago. Her desire to give voice and memory and power to our young people is a lesson I will always carry in my personal and professional life. Today, as we gather for this Holocaust Remembrance Time, it is time to reflect on one of the darkest moments in human history. The Holocaust did not occur in a vacuum. It was the culmination of years of hatred and discrimination, fueled by a sense of nationalistic pride and a desire for power. It is critical that we teach our students about the Holocaust, not only so that they can understand the historical context in which it occurred, but also so that they can learn to recognize the signs of discrimination within our own society. We must educate our students about the dangers of propaganda and the importance of critical thinking so that they can become responsible citizens who can identify and speak out against injustice. But education is not enough. We must encourage our young people to be active members of their communities, to stand up for what is right, and to advocate for those who are marginalized and oppressed. We must foster a sense of empathy and compassion in our students so that they can understand the pain and suffering that others have experienced and work toward building a more just and equitable society. As we observe Holocaust Remembrance Day, let us honor the memory of those who were lost by continuing to educate ourselves and our communities about this history. Let us strive to create a world where diversity is celebrated and where everyone is treated with respect and dignity. And let us never forget the lessons of the past so that we can work toward a brighter and more peaceful future. On behalf of my team and the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, I thank you for your support and encouragement.
Good afternoon. My name is Lauren McKenzie, and I teach 8th grade English to some amazing students at Pine Springs Preparatory Academy in Holly Springs. I'm thrilled to be here with you all experiencing the ceremony, Thankful to have the opportunity to share my project that my students have put together to keep alive the memories of Holocaust survivors. I'm proud to have some of these students here with me today. You probably saw them when you came in. I'm going to have them stand. Their work is all of the fabulous work on the table on the outside, and they put so much work into it. When I began planning our drama unit, I decided to use The Diary of Anne Frank, the play, as I've always had a special place in my heart for the story. While reading Anne's words is impactful, I wanted my students to have the chance to experience deep, intangible connections to the Holocaust, those who did not survive, and those who lived to tell their stories along with those of others. I began searching for ways to build this experience, eventually landing on a traveling exhibit with the NC Council on the Holocaust. Shout out to Mike Abramson. That included suitcases with articles in them. As we read through the play, we spent significant time diving into the historical aspect of what happened. We spent time stepping into Anne Frank's shoes, and I asked my students to decide what they would take with them if they were to be told they had 5 minutes to gather their most important belongings into a suitcase, after which there was no guarantee they'd ever return, nor any idea of where they were going. I built the suitcase artifact experience on this foundation, and my students were asked to look through the displays and craft an identity for each of the people who own these suitcases. What did the things they packed, the things they held most dear, say about who they were, where they were from, and where they thought they may be going? With every step of the project, I could see my students connecting and looking forward to learning more and more each day, and situating themselves into the relevancy of this topic to their own lives. To round out the experience, I created a final project which focused on the stories of survivors. When we spoke about survivors, even hosting a guest speaker, Mr. Shelley Bleiweiss, thank you, I asked my students to consider this. There are very few survivors left to tell their stories, along with the stories of those who are no longer with us. Who will tell their stories when they're no longer here? Their answer was us. With excitement and dedication, they each chose a survivor to research, learning all about their life before, during, and after the Holocaust, finding photos, reaching out to relatives they had found, interviewing family members, and recovering personal artifacts. They created an archive of each survivor's life and story, along with a visual representation to display, with the understanding that it was now their story to pass on, that they would be carrying on this legacy, ensuring that their survivor's story would be remembered. My students and I were so deeply impacted by this project, the experiences, and getting to know so many Holocaust survivors through research, making connections, and displaying those stories. Many of my students, along with their families, felt this would stay with them for many years to come, and I know it will stay with me. I will always believe that teaching the Holocaust is of paramount importance, and doing so in a way that students can wholly connect has made all of the difference. Thank you.
Oh, never say that you have reached the very end, though it's a bitter future may portend, because the hour for which we yearned will yet arrive, and our marching steps will thunder, we survive. From land of palm trees to the land of distant snow, we are here with our pain, with our woe, and wherever blood was shed in pain, our fighting spirits will resurrect again. Not lead but blood inscribed this song we sing. It's not a caroling of birds upon the wing, but was a people midst the crashing fires of hell that sang the song and fought courageous tale. But was a people midst the crashing fires of hell that sang this song and fought courageous till it fell.
It is the Jewish custom to light memorial or yahrzeit candles on the anniversary of a loved one's death as a symbol of the living memory of the deceased person. This custom has been adopted by Holocaust commemorations throughout the world, with remembrance candles lit to represent the living memory of the 6 million Jews and the 5 million other precious souls murdered in the Holocaust, to honor camp liberators, to honor victims of genocide and hate crimes, and to honor the righteous non-Jews who saved thousands of lives. Our ceremony consists of 10 lit candles. Mike Abramson will light the first candle. That candle, called the Shamas candle, will light 8 other candles. The next 6 candles will be lit by Holocaust survivors or children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. The 8th candle will be lit in honor of the non-Jewish victims of the Holocaust. The 9th candle will be lit in honor of the liberators of the death camps, slave labor camps, and detention centers. The 10th candle will be lit in honor of victims of genocide and hate crimes. Finally, an individual who represents the righteous non-Jews who saved Jews and others in the Holocaust will place the Shamas candle in an empty candle holder. We light the Shamas candle in memory of Gisela Gross Abramson. Gisela was a founder of the North Carolina Council on the Holocaust. She was an agent in an espionage unit of the Russian resistance forces, and she survived Majdanek death camp. Gisela immigrated to the United States in May of 1946. May the memory of every Holocaust victim inspire us to pursue meaningful and purposeful lives. Blessed art thou, soul of the universe, who melts hatred like a candle wax, leaving only a loving heart. I now invite Dr. Zohara Boyd to light the first of the 6 candles that commemorate victims of the Holocaust. Zohara was born April 17, 1942, in Pietrków-Trybunalski, Poland. Zohara's parents saved themselves and their infant daughter by escaping the ghetto with forged documents that proclaimed them to be Polish Catholics. They spent the war hiding openly. After the war, they immigrated to France in 1948, then to Canada, and finally to Trenton, New Jersey in 1952. Zohara is a professor emeritus of English at Appalachian State University. I now invite Barbara Fields to light the second candle representing victims of the Holocaust. After her mother was forced from Ukraine to Uzbekistan by the Russians, Barbara was born in Margolon resettlement camp in Uzbekistan. Having never met her father and separated from her mother at 3 years old, Barbara spent the remainder of the war as an orphan with hundreds of other orphans. For the next 6 years, they hid and traveled through the forests of eastern Russia to Poland. She immigrated to the United States in 1953 along with 2,000 other orphaned children. I now invite Shelley Bleiweiss to light the third candle to commemorate victims of the Holocaust. Shelley is the oldest of 2 Polish Holocaust survivors who met during deportation and survived independently in the open using fake identities as Polish laborers. They immigrated to the United States in May 1946 on the USS Marine Flasher, the first ship carrying Holocaust survivors from Germany. Shelley has become a Holocaust educator for over 20 years and is a respected instructor for the OLLI programs at Duke and UNC. I now invite Florence Link to light the fourth candle to commemorate victims of the Holocaust. Florence's parents and 2 children were living in a small shtetl near Vilna in June 1941 when the Germans invaded Lithuania. Everyone in Florence's extended family living in the shtetl was killed. Both children died of disease and hunger. Her parents survived the war and made their way to Austria, where they were rescued by the American army and stayed in a displaced persons camp. Florence was born in the DP camp and immigrated to the United States with her parents in 1951. I now invite Judy Hodgins to light the fifth candle to commemorate victims of the Holocaust. Judy is the daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, Susanna and George. Susanna's aunt and Susanna's sister were taken from her home and sent to a slave labor camp. After 2 weeks of very hard labor, Susanna escaped and hid until the end of the war. George was sent to a labor camp in the Carpathian Mountains. George and Susanna were married in 1946 and spent nearly 70 years together. They immigrated to the United States in 1958 after smuggling out of Hungary during the attempted revolt of 1956. I now invite Rita Monk to light the 6th and final candle for victims of the Holocaust. Rita is the daughter of 2 survivors of the Holocaust. Her mother, Esther Freeling, went into hiding with her family in the Ardennes forest of Belgium, the Nazis only a day or 2 behind them. Esther was only a teenager, but she bravely ran messages on her bicycle to resistance fighters. Rita's father, Abraham Wickenfeld, smuggled himself to Brussels. He was captured by Germans and sent to Auschwitz, where he somehow managed to survive for 2 years and 3 months. He was then forced to walk a 173-mile death march to Buchenwald, surviving with only 300 of the 2,300 who marched. 3 months later, he was liberated from Buchenwald by the U.S. Army. He and Esther came to the U.S. in 1948. I now invite Reverend Nancy Petty to light a candle to honor the non-Jewish victims of the Holocaust. Reverend Dr. Nancy E. Petty is a pastor of Pullen Memorial Baptist Church in Raleigh, where she has served for over 30 years. As a community faith leader, Reverend Petty has been and remains committed to interreligious dialogue and building bridges among people of faith in Raleigh and beyond. I now invite Walter Weinman to light a candle in honor of camp liberators. Walter is a Vietnam-era veteran. I now invite Dikron and Armin Kabinjian to light a candle to commemorate victims of genocide and hate crimes. Dikron and Armin are descendants of Armenian genocide survivors. Dikron's father was 5 years old and the only member of his extended family to survive the 1915 Armenian genocide in the city of Urfa. Armin's entire family and extended family were killed in the 1915 Armenian genocide by the Turks in the city of Marash. I invite Holly Holder to place the shamas candle in the empty candle holder to commemorate the righteous among the nations, the upstanders in the world who risk their lives to save others. Holly is a public school theater teacher in Kinston, North Carolina, who performs at many Holocaust observances. May all righteous people be a light unto the world. I now invite all Holocaust survivors in the audience to come up in front of the stage. Would 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generation descendants of Holocaust survivors please join us in front of the stage? Let us observe a moment of silence as we remember our dear ones and resolve never again. Thank you all for your observance of this moment. Please return to your seats.
מול רחמים, שוכן, שוכן במרומים, המצים הנוח, 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 תחת כנפי השינה. קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזכירים, לנשמות יקירינו, שהלכו, שהלכו לעולמם. בעל הרחמים, יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור, ויצרור, החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, ינוחו בשלום, בשלום על משכבם. ונאמר אמן.
Please be seated for a moment. I'm Rabbi Ariel Edry from Bet Shalom congregation here, and we'll be reciting Kaddish in a moment. Kaddish is a prayer that in the Jewish world we're all very familiar with, because it's the prayer that we always say to remember loved ones who are no longer with us. And yet, it's a prayer that does not speak of death or of dying. It's a prayer that is simply long affirmation of life. And it's a prayer that expresses the hope of a life of shalom, of peace for us and for everyone. This is how we respond to death, with affirmation for life. As you know, we rise to say Kaddish. Before you rise, let me read from our prayer book. Why do we rise, and what does it mean for us to rise and say Kaddish on a day like today? We rise to say Kaddish when a loved one has died, to say that though he is no longer able himself to stand for his beliefs, he has left behind loved ones who are willing and ready to stand up for them. We rise to say Kaddish in memory of our loved one who is gone, to say that the blessings she brought to life have not ended, because there are those who still feel gratitude for them and stand to express it. Like a pebble thrown in a pond, the good deeds of our loved ones continue to make ripples. Today and tomorrow, their effects will still be felt. We rise to say Kaddish for our loved ones who have died, to say that though their physical presence has now diminished, their light, what we learn from them, their influence in our life, their inspiration will never fade. When we rise to say Kaddish for family and friends who have died, our loved ones are being bound in the everlasting chain of life. They live in our memories, in our blessings, in our genes. They live in their enduring deeds, in our spirit, and in our hearts. So let us please rise to say Kaddish. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחי יכון וביום יכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשא בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, לאמירם בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו amen. May the maker of peace in the high heavens make peace over us, over all Israel, over all humanity, as we say amen. Thank you. Be seated.
Innerlied wie stervel weit, in a stiebel on a side, durch a finster niet kein Kreuz, gucken Kinder lecher reus. Ingelech mit flinke Käpp, Mädelech mit blonder Zepp, zusammen dort mit See. Eugen schwarze Spee, Eugen schwarze Fuhl mit Kein, Unanazala klein, Lippelek zum Kuschen nur, Start gelachte schwarze Hor. Die Mama hat ihm gebracht, eingewickelt in der Nacht, geguscht im Stark geklagt, stiller Hitze im Gesagt. Von heint mein Kind wird sein dein Ort, gedings dein Mames letzte Wort. fort. Ich behalte ich tot erfahr, weil dein Leben trat vor. Mit die Kinder spiel sich fein, still gehorsam sollst du sein, kein jüdisch Wort, kein jüdisch Lied, weil du bist nicht mehr kein Jid. Auf die Hint gehen Numen im, und mit Wechheit in Erstimm singt sie Jingele du mein, und sie wiegt ihm also ein. Nach dem Feind sie frei sich heust, und sie dreht zum Stubareus, und gefüllt mit Sorg und Schreck, und sie geht in Nacht weg.
I am very honored to introduce our featured speaker, Dr. Zahara Boyd, a Holocaust survivor and longtime resident of North Carolina. Zahara was born in Poland, April 17, 1942, in the first ghetto set up by the Nazis in occupied Poland. The family was able to escape the ghetto. Then, by obtaining documents of a Polish Catholic family, they survived the war by hiding in plain sight, moving from place to place. After the war, Zahara's family immigrated to Canada in 1949 and later arrived in the US in 1951. Dr. Boyd is Professor Emeritus of English at Appalachian State University, where she co-founded the Center for Judaic Holocaust and Peace Studies. The center's annual Rosen Symposium on the Holocaust has grown from a small session in 2002 to a week-long seminar with international participants. For years, Zahara has traveled across North Carolina to do what she is here to do today, to relate her family's experience in the Holocaust, and to remind us, as the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum states, I quote, how civilized people can act when bigotry, hatred, and indifference reign. So please join me in very warmly welcoming Dr. Zahara Boyd.
Here you go, Zahara. Thank you.
Before I begin to talk about myself and about my family's experiences, I'm going to stray a little bit from what I usually do and tell you a story, a true story. There was a mystery writer, very famous, Dashiell Hammett, who wrote the Thin Man stories. I'm sure some of you may have seen the movies with Myrna Loy and William Powell. The reason that he was such a good writer of mysteries was because he had actually been a Pinkerton detective before he started writing. And this is a story that he told about his days with the Pinkertons. A man had disappeared. He had gone off to work one day, kissed his wife goodbye, kissed his children goodbye, and vanished. 7 years had gone by, and after 7 years, a man, woman, a missing person may be proclaimed dead, and insurance may be paid. Person left behind may remarry, and so on. Well, this man had a very large insurance policy, and the insurance company was a little reluctant to give up all that money without one more search. And they hired Dashiell Hammett to do the search. And he found him within about a week or so in a neighboring town. And he had remarried. His wife was not very different from the wife he had left behind. He had children, not terribly different from the ones he had abandoned. He held a job very much like the one from which he had vanished. And when Dashiell Hammett asked him questions about this, what happened, the man said he had gone off to work, as always, and he had stopped to look at a safe that was being hoisted up through a window because it was too large and heavy to take up the stairs. A lot of people had stopped to look at it, but he had stopped precisely where the chain broke and the safe missed him by just inches. This experience jarred him so badly. He thought, what have I accomplished with my life? What have I done? What have I seen? We live in a world where safes can land on your head at any moment, and I'd better do something to experience life. And so off he went, looking for adventure, looking for something, and no more safes fell on his head. Nothing more outstanding or dangerous had happened to him. After 3 or 4 years, he stopped searching. He decided to go back to his life, but he was too ashamed to go back to his wife. And so he founded a new family, as much like his old one as he could. Well, those of us who experienced the Holocaust lived through a time when safes were tumbling on people's heads every day, every moment. Now, our generation ahead of mine had lived a normal life. And when the war ended, they felt the war was, those who were still alive, sad, beaten, broken perhaps, but they felt that life had gone back to normal. For those of us who were born during the Holocaust, we were born with those safes falling on our heads. And the time in between our birth and normalcy seems like a brief respite. A lot of us still wait for safes to come tumbling on our heads. And at the age of 81 tomorrow, I had come to a point where I also felt secure. No more safes coming down. I've been around for quite a while. And then it seemed like the United States, this haven that we had found, is suddenly madly projecting safes onto our heads. When I hear about Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that Jewish lasers from outer space were causing wildfires, when I hear about our esteemed former president saying that Nazis, after all, there's good people among them, and inviting them to dinner and praising every dictator whose name he could pronounce. He couldn't quite bring himself to say Hitler, you know. I guess even he realized that that would be crossing a line. But safes are indeed being pitched at us. And listening to the Star-Spangled Banner being sung so beautifully by a young lady whose voice is truly a national treasure, I couldn't quite stand as straight and tall with my hand on my heart as I have since the age of 10. I was frightened. So we do have to hold, I had thought that I wouldn't be doing these commemorations very much longer, that there wasn't any point. And again, at the age of 80, 81, dragging myself to different places, making my husband drive me to all these different places because I've quit driving, that I wouldn't need to be doing this anymore. And I stand here realizing that they're going to have to carry me off one of these platforms feet first, because people need to hear the story. And so I will tell you my story, if I may be permitted to take a sip of water first. I was born, as you have already heard, in a town called Piotrków Trybunalski in south central Poland there, right on the German border. And it was the first ghetto that the Nazis established after they invaded. And there were reasons for picking Piotrków. It had exactly the right sized population of Jews who were concentrated in one area of the town, largely near the synagogue. There was a railroad station there, which had nice tracks that led to places called Treblinka, Auschwitz. And you can see here the Piotrków ghetto. It was not like the Warsaw ghetto, an enclosed ghetto. It wasn't bricked in. It was barbed wire. It was guards. It was men with dogs, clubs. And people were, first of all, sufficiently cowed not to make too much of a fuss, but also, if you've read Elie Wiesel's Night, people who say, what can they do, kill all of us? We've been through worse. We're in here in places that we know. We're here with our families. This isn't so bad. And when the trains started to leave, presumably, as the people had been told, for the newly conquered territories in the east towards Russia, where there was more room, where there would be more food. But my father, who had been a judge before the war and was used to the idea of weighing evidence, realized that these trains, because, trains, cars, they get dinged, people put graffiti on them. He realized these cars, these trains were coming back much too soon, and that no one who had left on those trains was heard from again. And so he decided that he would have to formulate a plan. And now, if you would show the slides with the artificial documents, can you put that up? There you go. I have here a birth certificate that my parents are Edward and Stanislava, and that my mother's name was Boguslavski. It was a birth certificate that actually belonged to a Polish Catholic child. As you can see, my name on there is Zofia, and that was the little girl's name. I was born April 17th. She was born April 29th. My father was able to get these documents because he still had friends in the courthouse. And how he got people to smuggle these things into him, I do not know. They never talked about it. So that's my false birth certificate. My father's real name was Moses. You can imagine how well that would have gone over. My mother's name was Esther. She was known as Ita. And they were of approximately the same age as the other Mushinsky family. And this was the wonder. Our name was Mushinsky. It wasn't Goldberg. It wasn't Wiener. It wasn't any of the names that could be readily identified as Jewish. It was a real Polish last name. I have no idea where we got it. I've had my DNA done, and I am 98% East European Jewish and 2% Spanish. So just where that name came from, I do not know. But he also got, and I think there's another certificate there, which was, I think, my real birth certificate, where my mother's name is Hampel and my name is Zohara. But these papers saved our lives. Now, just how my father got us out of the ghetto once he had those papers, I don't know. Again, my parents would never, ever talk about anything. Whether it was through the sewers, which was one way out, whether it was through the barbed wire, whether it was by bribing someone who stood there guarding the place. But we got out. And many Jews who did manage to escape from ghettos made the mistake of trying to go to forests, to farms, thinking that they would be safe, sort of hiding in the wild. Urban people who didn't know a poisonous mushroom from a safe one, thinking that they could forage. My father had gotten his law degree at the University of Warsaw, and that is where he took us on a train directly into Warsaw. Jews were fleeing from Warsaw at this time. My father, who was always a very reckless, some say brave, some say very foolish man, took us directly to Warsaw, where we posed as a Polish Catholic family that had been bombed out. And there were places one could rent because so many of the men had been drafted. Women didn't know whether they were wives or widows, and they were willing to take in this nice Polish Catholic family, which, because it had been middle class and because my parents had managed to salvage some money and some jewelry, were able to pay. And so we stayed with these various people. If you could bring up again that picture of my mother, my father, and me, the one that was slide one. There we go. My father, these are pictures of us right after the war. This was on our passports when we were leaving Poland. My father, blonde, blue-eyed, he looked like a short little Scandinavian. My mother, even though she had dark hair, had very, very Slavic features, the broad, wide cheekbones, the straight nose, eyes that were almost silver colored. She did not look particularly Jewish. And then there was the problem. I inherited my father's curls, my mother's dark hair, and if you saw that sand painting when the woman did that face, how the eyes were made to look sad, Polish word for it, smutne oczy, sad eyes. Those were quintessentially Jewish eyes. And although my parents kept hair ribbons and bonnets on me and did their best to straighten my hair, you can see what it looks like in its natural state. There's just no way to get rid of that curl, although the red comes out of a bottle. They should have left me behind. It was the simplest, most straightforward thing to do, and people did that. They abandoned their children, left them on the stairs of churches, hoping somebody would be kind. I knew a girl who had been abandoned that way by her parents, who reclaimed her. She had been adopted by a Polish family that took care of her and loved her dearly. And the court case getting her back to her Jewish parents destroyed their lives. She told me when we were 16 years old, we were in high school together, I am going to make them pay for it. She didn't want to come back, and she made them pay for it. Her mother ultimately committed suicide, which was not an uncommon ending to the lives of survivors. No one survives forever. And surviving survival was not easy. But my parents took me along for the ride. The other person that they took with them was my mother's youngest sister, who also had blonde hair, blue eyes, was a very attractive young woman in her early 20s. And, you know, the kind of attractive young woman that any nice Polish Catholic boy would have been happy to snap up. So that is how we lived. There was just one problem with that, one big problem. The people who rented us rooms, they were nice people. They invited us to go to church with them. They wanted to be kind. They wanted us to participate in their festivities. My mother had no idea that a rosary is not a necklace. None of them had any idea that how you genuflect. Jews wash their hands before prayers, and here's this lovely bowl of water as you enter the church. So we had to keep moving from one house to another. As people got suspicious, we had to leave. And as the war wore on, there were fewer and fewer places to hide. Warsaw was kind of a free fire zone. There were bombs dropping. There was starvation. And then one day, the Germans were gone. And we were safe. On the brink of starvation, but safe. Now, this is a picture of my father's family in 1938, just before the war, before the invasion. The people with the red circles around their heads were the ones who survived. There's my father's oldest sister, Dora, who had met an American tourist. He was from the shtetl, from the town, and he had come back home to visit his parents and to look for a bride. And he found her. And he took her back to the United States a few weeks after this picture, which was, I think, their engagement or their wedding picture. My father's other sister and her husband were both killed. Their daughter, Natalie, who was about 9 or 10, survived on her own after her parents were killed. You can see the people with the X's on their chests, my grandmother and a 10-year-old cousin who had, well, you know, into every family, there's a wild one and a black sheep. She had a mother who was one of my father's sisters, but as for a father, big question mark. So the family raised her, and my father treated her as his youngest sister. The ones with the X's on their chests, my grandmother and my 10-year-old cousin Mitya, were taken to the synagogue and shot. The Germans took a bunch of older women, a bunch of young children, lined them up in front of the ark, and shot them. The rest we never really found out. Was it Auschwitz? Was it Treblinka? Where it was? What happened? But after the war, when my parents looked for them, they were not there. Well, my father, in his usual reckless way, got himself into trouble, this time with the Russians who had occupied Poland, came as liberators, came to stay as occupiers. And my father, who had received his judgeship again, just couldn't keep his head down. And he wrote an editorial that some newspaper was dumb enough to publish, and we were on the run again. And once again, my father was able to use his connections at court to get us visas. And you talk about those suitcases and what would you take if you only had 5 minutes? We took books, a few clothes, and a whole bunch of books. And we were on a train to Paris within about 24 hours of my father's getting those visas. I had learned to read when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and we had learned German as well, and I had learned how to read Gothic Schrift, you know, those curly Q German letters. Those books looked to be much too old for me, and when we reached the border, the guards slit the backs of the books because they were sure that something must be being smuggled. This very small child, I was 7 at the time, I looked about 4, 5, couldn't possibly own those books. And they had me read from those books. One of them was Heidi, and another one by an Italian author called Amicis. The book was called The Heart, Serce. And they were so amazed at this performing little monkey that they just didn't look very much more and just waved us on through. And so there we were in Paris with books and some very distant relatives who put us up for a few months until we got a boat to Canada. And we ended up in Montreal for a number of years, where I went to the Jüdische Volksschule, the Jewish People's School, and where for the first time I learned that my name was Zohara, not Sophia, and what it is to be Jewish. I learned about Israel. I learned some Hebrew. And just as we were settling in well in Canada, my father's sister, the one who had married the American, found us and was able to get us a visa into the United States. They sponsored us, and we ended up, well, we were scheduled to end up in Evansville, Indiana, where they lived, but somehow we got sidetracked and ended up in Trenton, New Jersey, where I went to school. There was the Dr. Herzl Zion Hebrew School. The Jüdische Volksschule had been a Zionist school. The Jüdische Volksschule, or the Dr. Herzl Zion Hebrew School, was very, very, very religious. I wasn't a good, obedient little Jewish girl. I questioned too much, and the rabbi's way of controlling us was to give us a good whack on the head. You know, if you ever watch NCIS, the way. And then when I got to be 12, of course, I could no longer be whacked by hand, so I got whacked with a ruler. And one day, my parents were called in for a conference, and the rabbi said to my parents, "What a mystery this is. God creates a mind like that and puts it in the head of a girl." I was out of that school the next day and in a public school. And from there, I proceeded to have a perfectly normal, sort of, American childhood. I went to Douglas College, which was the women's division of Rutgers University. And there I met the last person in the world my parents would have thought I'd find, a nice Episcopalian boy whose ancestors came to America in the 1680s, 1690s. And after that, it got to be a pretty normal American life, or so it seems on the surface. The safes are still falling. We were at my most vivid memory from the war was we were in a cellar during a bombardment, and the cellar had these large pillars that were holding the whole thing up, and the house was struck by a blockbuster bomb, sheared it in half. Everyone on one side was killed. Everyone on the other side survived. We were on the other side. And although it has gotten better in the last 10 years or so, largely because I've had my septum straightened out, but I used to get terrible, terrible head colds, and my nose would be stopped up, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and I wasn't in my bed with a head cold. I was in the cellar, and I was choking on the dust. The other thing that stayed with me, which is actually my very first memory, was my father had been out, I don't know, foraging for food. This was during the time when partisan groups were starting to strike back against the Germans. And two German soldiers saw my father foraging in a garbage can, essentially, looking for something to eat, I guess. And one of them just very casually pulled out his gun, shot my father in the back. Fortunately, it was a glancing sort of thing. The bullet went up his back and it left him with just a finger-shaped scar that wouldn't tan. And he lay still on the sidewalk, pretending to be dead until it got dark. And my mother was standing in a doorway holding me. And I felt her tears on my head. It felt like rain. And when he started to crawl toward her, she picked him up and rolled him over. She was wearing a dress with red flowers on it. And the way my eyes saw it, when his back touched the flowers, they melted together. And those were my very, very earliest memories that stayed with me. Nightmares about my father's being shot took the form of not my father being shot, but something like I'm in a bank and there is a man in a white shirt ahead of me and bank robbers come in and I know he is going to be shot. I'm on a stagecoach headed for San Francisco and the Indians attack, and the stagecoach driver is wearing a white shirt and he gets shot in the back, and those red flowers bloom on his back. And the form this took in the last, well, several years ago at this point, of course, when Obama used to go out into the crowd wearing his white shirt. And I was always, always convinced that I was going to see those red flowers again, because part of being a survivor, it's not happy endings. It's hanging on by your fingernails and waiting for that next safe. Thank you.
Eli, Eli, שלא יגמל לעולם, החול וחיים, רשרוש על המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם, החול והים, רשרוש על המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם. Oh God, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the hand of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart.
In 1975, a group of people gathered at my parents' house in North Hills to discuss their common aspirations for Holocaust education in North Carolina. I was there. I was a senior in high school. They chose 5 goals. First, they wanted a Holocaust organization sanctioned and confirmed by the state government and the governor. This happened in 1981, led by Dr. Elmo Scoggin, the first chair of the council, Arnold Zagrai, Dr. Abe Holtzman, Gisela Abramson, Bill Schrago, the second chair of the council, and Runya and Henry Vogelhut, also Holocaust survivors like my mother. Thank you, Governor Hunt. And the North Carolina Council on the Holocaust was established. Second, they wanted a formal Holocaust observance presented annually that was formally recognized by our state legislature and governor. Again, thank you, Governor Hunt. In fact, Governor Hunt attended our first observance in 1982. If you can cue up the screen for the proclamation, I'd appreciate it. Hopefully you'll see on the screens is the 2023 Governor's Proclamation by Governor Cooper, marking today in North Carolina the days of remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust. I have an electronic version of the proclamation that I can email to you if you would like a copy. Third, these individuals wanted formal Holocaust training for teachers to learn about the Holocaust and how to teach the Holocaust. This began in 1990, led by our great Linda Scher with assistance from Gisela. Thank you, Linda. Enhancements to the teacher workshops and resources have been provided by Marion Wasson, who is in the back leading our IT, Lee Holder, the father of Holly Holder, and by Karen Claich, who also leads a superior group of Holocaust educators in our state. Fourth, they wanted state legislation to require a Holocaust curriculum for North Carolina public schools. Thank you, Richard Schwartz, for writing the Holocaust Education Act and working so hard to ensure its passage. Massive amount of work. And thanks to Richard, the Holocaust Council has strong bipartisan support from both chambers of the General Assembly. Finally, they wanted a Holocaust memorial formally recognized by the state government and placed on public land. The absolutely brilliant artist, Victoria Milstein, came to North Carolina and has been working for years on a memorial sculpture. She lives in Greensboro with her fantastic husband, Ron. This Tuesday, April 18th, she will unveil the state's first publicly funded Holocaust memorial in LeBauer Park in Greensboro, beginning at 5 p.m. I hope you all have a handout that we left on chairs. And on the back, you can find a QA code that you can scan for further questions. What a monumental task the Milsteins did, getting the supplies, making the sculpture, and going through the politics for funding and to have the unveiling this Tuesday. Most notably, this memorial will be the first of its kind in the nation to commemorate the lives lost of women and girls in the Holocaust. It is entitled, "She Wouldn't Take Off Her Boots." Thank you, Victoria Milstein. We will now play a brief trailer of the memorial. Victoria will be available after this commemoration to speak more about the memorial. After the video, I will ask Victoria to stand so she can be recognized.
Over a period of 3 days, more than 1,000 women in La Playa were massacred.
That's the history Victoria Milstein learned on the March of the Living. As part of the trip, she walked through Auschwitz and specifically the women's section.
I walked through the women's camp and I thought, I as an artist, we're the canaries in the coal mine. I've got to do work that has to do with the story of the women and children in the Holocaust.
This led her on a journey to create a monument to these women, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters, and to educate the public on the atrocities of hate. And she remembered a photograph.
I saw this photograph of generations of women right before they were brutally murdered. And you know how when you see something, you can't undo what you've seen? It's like I saw this and I was changed forever. The word monument sits at the intersection of sculpture and sign. These signs stand as a public form of education. In the center, you see the matriarch of the family. They were told to strip, and she would not take off her boots. I see within her such a resilience. I see within her all of the women and children that have been victims of genocide. And I see in her everything, the opposite of what the Nazi soldiers were trying to commemorate by photographing them, is the inhumanity, is them being less than human.
Shelley Weiner is a Holocaust survivor. She credits her mother and aunt for saving her and her cousin.
I would not be here if my mother was not the strong, brave, courageous woman she was, because I was 4 years old. Can you imagine keeping a 4-year-old quiet?
Honoring her mother is why Shelley is lending the image of her hands to the project.
These are my mother's hands. My mother and I had the same, and when I look at my hands, I see my mother.
Anti-Semitism is at one of the highest it's been in our country. I don't know exactly the correlation. I don't know if it has to do with the pandemic. I'm not even sure about that. But what I'm sure about is that this is work that has to be done.
I think it's so appropriate having this monument here in Greensboro of women, because Greensboro is a unique community. It has accepted the differences of people a lot more than the communities around us. And I know that this monument will be appreciated by our community.
I am so proud to have Victoria on our council. And Victoria, will you please stand so we can formally recognize and thank you? Again, please scan the QR code in the back, and I hope I can see you in Greensboro on Tuesday. Thank you all for coming out today. I see many of you who I know. If we have not met, please introduce yourself to me after this commemoration. Thank you, Dr. Boyd, for your fantastic presentation. And thank you, Bill, for driving Zahara everywhere around the state, and especially today from Winston-Salem. I send Zahara around everywhere I can, as you can imagine, to every hamlet in the state through our Speakers Bureau. Thank you, Steve Cass, and the officers of the Community Security Service to assist in our security today. We on the North Carolina Council on the Holocaust believe it is our collective responsibility to ensure that the memory of the Holocaust is preserved for future generations. We can continue to learn from the lessons from the Holocaust and strive to create a world where all people are respected and valued. We reaffirm our commitment to build a peaceful and inclusive future by honoring the memory of those who suffered and perished during the Holocaust. Let us remember that every person has the power to make a difference, and that we must fight together and stand together in the face of hate and bigotry. Lastly, we would greatly appreciate your feedback for today's event. Simply access the survey through the URL link in the back of the program, right here in the back. We also have provided for you a QR code should you choose to take the survey directly from your phone. And please let me know if you are interested in serving on the planning committee for next year's Holocaust observance. Also, on the very back of the program, you'll find websites for our Holocaust Council so you can learn more about us. I deeply appreciate you coming out today, and thank you for attending today's commemoration. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea